My name is Amanda. I am 42 years old and I live in a small town in Colorado with my 15-year-old daughter, Emily. I am a single mom who has handled every hardship life has thrown at me, but nothing could have prepared me for the moment I stood in the emergency room watching the nurse cut away the cloth around Emily's hand. Her fingers were swollen to twice their size. The skin was already turning a deep, angry purple, and the X-ray on the screen showed two fractures clear as day. The doctor spoke in that careful voice meant for bad news. The injuries were caused by extreme force bending the fingers backward until the bones snapped. I did not need him to explain because Emily had already told me. Through tears, she had whispered it was Aunt Lisa. She said my own sister grabbed her hand, held her in place, and bent each finger back until she heard the crack. She said Lisa's eyes were cold and fixed on hers the whole time. Emily told me Lisa leaned in close so she could feel her breath and said, "This is what happens when you talk back to adults." Then she smiled as if she had done something righteous. My stomach twisted into knots and I felt a rush of heat climb up my neck. This was the same sister who used to hold Emily in the hospital the day she was born, the same sister who baked her birthday cakes and sat through her school plays. I wanted to believe there had been a misunderstanding, but the evidence was all around me. The medical report, the nurse's testimony, the neighbor who had heard the shouting and rushed Emily to the hospital. Every detail fit together into a truth I did not want to accept. In that moment, something inside me broke. I realized family is not always the safe place we think it is. Sometimes the danger comes from the people we trust the most. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my ears, but beneath the fear was a different sensation. Cold, sharp rage. I knew right then there would be no quiet phone call, no private apology, no sweeping this under the rug. I looked at Emily, clutching her bandaged hand, her eyes red from crying, and I made a silent promise. I will make her answer for this. I will make sure everyone knows exactly what she did. And I will never let her hurt you again. What Lisa did was not just violence. It was a calculated act meant to dominate, humiliate, and control. She had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. I felt the weight of that truth settle on me like a heavy coat. This was going to change everything, and I was ready to fight. Growing up in our small Colorado town, Lisa and I were inseparable. Our parents both worked long hours, Dad driving trucks across state lines, and Mom pulling double shifts as a nurse. So a lot of the time, it felt like we only had each other. I was 2 years older, which meant I was automatically the built-in protector, the one who walked her to school, stood between her and trouble, and made sure she got home safe. I remember walking home in the snow when we were kids, Lisa's scarf slipping loose, and without thinking, I wrapped my own around her neck and told her to keep it. That was how it always was with us. I gave her the bigger half of the sandwich, the warmer blanket, the seat by the window. When some boys in the neighborhood teased her for her freckles in 5th grade, I marched over and told them if they ever said another word to her, they'd answer to me. They didn't test me twice. Lisa looked at me back then like I could fix anything. I carried that role well into our teens. At 14, I was walking her home from middle school, listening to her complain about math class when she suddenly tripped and scraped her knee. I gave her my hoodie to wipe away the blood, held her arm as we limped the rest of the way, and stayed up late making sure the bandage was secure. She would grin at me over dinner and tell Mom I was better than any nurse. We shared a bedroom for years, whispering secrets long after lights out, planning the future. She used to say we'd always live close to each other, raise our kids together, and spend summers by the lake like we did as children. When I got my first job at the diner at 16, I saved up to buy her a charm bracelet for her birthday, each charm representing something from our childhood. She wore it every day until she was 20, and when she met her first boyfriend and wanted to sneak out to a concert I covered for her with Mom and Dad, even slipping her a little cash for gas. That bond carried over when Emily was born. Lisa was in the delivery room, the first to hold her after me, her face glowing with the same joy I felt. She babysat so I could nap brought-over dinners when I was too exhausted to cook, and took Emily for ice cream on weekends just because. There's a picture of Lisa holding Emily when she was 3, both of them with matching frosting on their noses from a baking day. Lisa would plan treasure hunts for Emily's birthdays, hide little notes in her backpack, and cheer louder than anyone at her school performances. For years, I thought Emily couldn't have a better aunt. Even when my marriage fell apart and I was scrambling to pay bills, Lisa was there buying groceries, slipping me gas money, making me feel like I wasn't alone in it. She was my sister and my best friend, and Emily adored her. That's why the change in Lisa hit me so hard. Because I had seen her at her best, I knew what she was capable of when she loved someone. It made the thought of her hurting Emily impossible to reconcile with the girl who once stayed up all night sewing a Halloween costume just to see her niece smile. Back then, Lisa was the kind of person who would defend her family without hesitation, who would show up without being asked who made you believe you could weather any storm because she was in it with you. Those memories were carved into me, and for the longest time, they were my proof that family meant something unshakable. I never thought to question it, never imagined a day when I would have to protect Emily from her own aunt. The Lisa I knew back then would have been furious at anyone who laid a hand on Emily. She would have been the one in the emergency room with me demanding justice. That history made the betrayal feel like a knife twisted in my back. The bond we had built wasn't just sisterhood. It was a lifetime of shared moments inside jokes and mutual trust. Losing that wasn't just losing a person. It was losing the belief that someone who had been my safe place could never become the threat. That's the thing about toxic changes in people you love. You don't see them coming because you're still looking at the version of them that lived in your memories. You keep telling yourself that person is still in there somewhere. And for years, that's exactly what I believed about Lisa. It was why I kept excusing small red flags, why I brushed off comments she made to Emily, why I convinced myself she was just having a bad day when she acted sharp or dismissive. I clung to the past so hard that I didn't realize the present was rewriting everything I thought I knew about her. And it all started to unravel the day she met Mark. Mark entered Lisa's life like a gust of wind that slammed the door behind it. He was charming in that polished way that makes people lean in when he speaks, the kind of man who knows how to shake a hand just firmly enough to make you feel slightly off balance. He worked in construction management, drove a spotless black truck, and always seemed to have a story ready about the deals he was closing or the people he knew. The first time I met him, he looked me up and down in a way that made me feel like he was assessing whether I measured up to some invisible checklist. Lisa laughed more when he was around, but it was a different kind of laughter. It didn't bubble up naturally like it used to. It sounded performative, like she was always trying to keep up with his mood. Not long after they started dating, I began to notice small shifts in her behavior. She canceled our Saturday coffee date, saying Mark had planned something more important. She stopped dropping by to see Emily, claiming her weekends were packed. At first, I didn't think much of it. New relationships can be all-consuming, but over time the excuses piled up and the distance grew. Then came the subtle criticisms. Lisa started making comments about my parenting, suggesting I was too soft on Emily. She said Emily was a little too mouthy for her age and needed more discipline. The words stung especially because they came from someone who used to indulge Emily's every whim. I brushed it off, telling myself Lisa didn't mean harm. But Mark's influence was unmistakable. He had this way of framing control as care. He would talk about how families needed hierarchy, how kids needed to know their place. He said these things casually at family gatherings, and I could see Lisa nodding along like it was gospel. I started to realize Lisa was dressing differently too. Her jeans and sweaters were replaced by tailored dresses and heels. She stopped talking about the books she loved and instead recited details about Mark's projects or the vacations they were planning. It was like her life had been repainted in his colors. Emily noticed the difference. She asked me one night why Aunt Lisa didn't come over anymore. I told her adults get busy, but even as the words left my mouth, I knew it wasn't the truth. The truth was Lisa was becoming someone who looked at us as less. It wasn't just absence. It was a withdrawal of warmth replaced by a thin layer of judgment. The shift was so gradual, it was easy to deny at first, but by the time I admitted it to myself, Lisa was fully entrenched in Mark's way of thinking. At a 4th of July barbecue, I watched Mark order Lisa around like she was an assistant, not a partner, and she obeyed without hesitation. When Emily accidentally spilled a soda, Mark gave her a look so sharp it made her step back. Lisa didn't comfort her. She told Emily to apologize for being careless in a tone that sounded more like Mark than my sister. That was when I realized the sister I grew up with was slipping away. And though I didn't know it yet, the person taking her place was capable of doing something I would never forgive. The tension between us kept building in ways I tried to ignore. At family dinners, Lisa would make little jabs at Emily's clothes, or the way she spoke, saying things like that skirt is too short for a girl your age, or you should learn to keep your opinions to yourself. Emily would shrink a little each time, and I could feel my patience thinning. One afternoon in late spring, we were all at a backyard barbecue at our parents' house. The air was warm, kids were running around, and the smell of burgers filled the yard. Emily had been helping my mom carry drinks to the patio when Lisa called her over. "Hey, Emily, come help me clean up the trash over here," she said, pointing to the far corner where paper plates and cups had piled up. Emily hesitated. She was in the middle of a conversation with her cousin about a school project, but she put down her soda and went over. As she started picking things up, Lisa began giving orders in a clipped voice. "Put that in the recycling." "No, not like that. Faster." Emily tried to keep up, but she tripped over a lawn chair and a plate slid from her hand, landing in the grass. Lisa's face hardened. She muttered something about kids being lazy these days and told Emily to go fetch more trash bags. I stepped over and said Emily has been helping all afternoon. Why don't you give her a break? Lisa's eyes flicked to me, cool and dismissive. Maybe if you taught her some discipline, she'd finish a task without whining. The comment landed like a slap. This wasn't the sister who used to encourage Emily to take her time baking cookies or who clapped for her at every recital. This was someone channeling Mark's superiority, and it made my skin crawl. That summer, the small digs turned into open criticism. At a birthday dinner for our father, Emily told a story about a debate she'd had in class. Lisa cut her off, saying in front of everyone, "You really shouldn't talk back to teachers. It's disrespectful." Emily's cheeks flushed, but she said calmly, "I wasn't being disrespectful. I was answering a question." Lisa leaned forward with a sharp smile. "That's talking back. If you were my kid, you'd learn quick not to do that." The room went quiet. I told Lisa to knock it off, but she just shrugged. That was the night Emily told me she didn't want to go to Aunt Lisa's anymore. I promised her she wouldn't have to if she didn't feel comfortable, but part of me hoped the tension would pass. I told myself maybe Lisa was stressed, maybe Mark's attitude was rubbing off more than she realized. I didn't want to believe she was choosing to treat Emily this way, but the truth was I could see a line forming between us. Lisa and Mark on one side, full of rules about respect, that looked more like control, and me and Emily on the other, just trying to keep our peace. The thing about lines is that once they're drawn, it's only a matter of time before someone dares to cross them. That moment came months later in a way so sudden and violent it would leave Emily in bandages and me in a state of cold fury I had never felt before. And it all started with one afternoon visit to Lisa's house when I thought Emily would be safe for a few hours. That afternoon had started out ordinary. I had a work meeting that couldn't be rescheduled, and Emily had the day off from school. Lisa called the night before saying she could watch Emily for a few hours. Against my better judgment, I agreed. Part of me wanted to believe we could still have normal family interactions, and Emily, though wary, didn't protest. I dropped her off just before lunch. Lisa's house looked spotless from the outside, the flower beds neat, the porch swept. Mark's truck was in the driveway. I hesitated for a second, but told myself everything would be fine. I hugged Emily and told her I'd be back around 4. I had no idea that less than 3 hours later I would be racing to the hospital. According to Emily, it began with something as small as a disagreement over where to put the clean dishes. Lisa had asked her to unload the dishwasher. Emily said she didn't know where everything went. Lisa snapped that she should have been paying attention the last time she was there. Emily muttered under her breath that she was trying. That single word, trying, was enough to ignite Lisa's temper. She accused Emily of talking back, of being disrespectful, and ordered her to stand still. Emily says Lisa's face changed in that moment, her jaw tight, her eyes flat like she wasn't really seeing her niece anymore, but some challenge she had to crush. Lisa grabbed Emily's left hand, her grip so tight Emily couldn't pull away, and bent her index finger back sharply. Emily yelped in pain. Instead of stopping, Lisa moved to the middle finger, twisting until there was a sharp crack. Emily screamed. Mark was in the living room and came to the doorway, but instead of stopping Lisa, he smirked and leaned against the frame. Lisa bent the ring finger next this time with both hands. Emily was sobbing, begging her to stop, but Lisa said in a low voice, "This is what happens when you talk back to adults." The final snap came with a force that sent Emily to her knees. Lisa let go almost casually and told her to go wash her face. Emily says she cradled her hand against her chest and stumbled toward the bathroom, but the pain was so bad she got dizzy. That's when the neighbor, Mrs. Collins, heard the commotion through the open window. She'd been watering her front garden when she heard Emily's cries. She came over, knocked, and when Mark opened the door, she could see Emily in the hallway holding her hand and crying, "Mrs." Collins asked what happened, but Mark told her it was just a misunderstanding. Lisa stood behind him, arms crossed, silent. Mrs. Collins didn't buy it. She pushed past him and went to Emily, who was pale and shaking. Mrs. Collins asked if she wanted to go to the hospital. Emily nodded. Without another word, Mrs. Collins led her out, ignoring Lisa calling after them. By the time I got the call from Mrs. Collins, they were already at the ER. My meeting might as well have been in another universe. My heart pounded as I drove the steering wheel slippery under my hands. Every scenario played through my mind, but nothing prepared me for seeing Emily's hand, the swelling, the unnatural angles of her fingers. The doctor explained the fractures, the torn ligaments, the deep tissue damage. He asked if we needed to file a report. My answer was immediate yes. While Emily was being treated, I stepped into the hallway and called Lisa. She answered on the second ring. I didn't even get out the words before she said, "Amanda, you need to calm down. Emily is fine." I felt my voice rise. "She is not fine. You broke her fingers." Lisa scoffed. "She was being disrespectful. Maybe now she'll think twice before mouthing off." My vision tunneled. "You're lucky I'm at the hospital, or I'd be at your door right now." Mark's voice cut in deep and mocking. "Amanda, kids need discipline. Maybe you should try it sometime instead of raising a brat." I gripped the phone so hard my knuckles ached. "You stay away from my daughter," I said. "Both of you. The next time we talk, it will be through the police." Lisa laughed like it was absurd. "You wouldn't do that to family." "Watch me," I said, and hung up. When I went back into the room, Emily was sitting quietly, her hand wrapped in fresh bandages. She looked up at me, eyes rimmed with red. "Are you mad at me?" she asked. My chest tightened. "Never. This isn't your fault. None of it." I sat beside her, took her uninjured hand in mine, and made her the same promise I'd made in my head in the ER lobby. "I will protect you from them, no matter what it takes." In that moment, the anger solidified into something sharper. This wasn't just about what Lisa had done. It was about every time she'd undermined Emily, every small cruelty that had led to this. She had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed, and I was going to make sure the whole world knew it. The hours after leaving the hospital felt like walking through a fog laced with electricity, every nerve in my body buzzing with anger. Emily was exhausted, so I got her settled on the couch with her favorite blanket, a cup of tea, and the remote. I sat in the kitchen staring at my phone, knowing I needed to start taking steps, but also bracing for the fallout. It didn't take long. My phone rang and Mom's name flashed on the screen. I answered, thinking maybe she had heard from Mrs. Collins, or even from Lisa. "Amanda, what is going on?" she said without preamble. "Lisa called me in tears, saying you're threatening her over some misunderstanding with Emily." I took a deep breath. "Mom, this is not a misunderstanding." Lisa broke Emily's fingers. There was a pause, then a scoff. "I'm sure she didn't mean to. Kids exaggerate when they're upset." My voice sharpened. "The X-rays don't exaggerate, Mom. Neither does the neighbor who heard Emily screaming and took her to the ER. Mom's tone shifted into that clipped register she used when she wanted to shut down a conversation. "This family doesn't air its dirty laundry in public. You need to drop this before it gets out of hand." Out of hand, I repeated the irony bitter on my tongue. "My daughter's hand is literally broken, and you want me to just forget it." "It's not just me," she said. "Your father thinks you're overreacting too. He says Lisa was probably trying to teach her a lesson." My stomach turned. "So it was fine in their eyes to inflict serious injury as long as you called it discipline." I hung up before I said something I couldn't take back. Minutes later, my phone lit up again. This time, it was Aunt Carol, then Cousin Jennifer, each delivering some version of the same message. Don't ruin the family over this. Think about how embarrassed Lisa must be. Maybe Emily should apologize for mouthing off. Each call made my resolve harder, not softer. It was becoming painfully clear that most of them would rather protect the image of the family than the actual people in it. They were willing to excuse violence as long as it stayed behind closed doors. Emily came into the kitchen, then cradling her bandaged hand. "Who was that?" she asked. "Family," I said, forcing my voice to stay calm. "What did they say?" I hesitated, then told her the truth. "They think we should just move on." Emily's eyes widened. "Move on!" She broke my fingers. I reached over and brushed her hair back. "I know. And we're not moving on. We're moving forward, and that means doing something about it." The idea had already started to take shape in my mind. This wasn't going to be a quiet warning or a stern conversation. Lisa and Mark had crossed a line, and if the rest of the family wanted to look the other way, then I was going to make sure the whole town saw what they'd done. I didn't care if it made people uncomfortable. They needed to be uncomfortable. Maybe then they would stop excusing abuse just because it came from someone with the same last name. That night, after Emily went to bed, I pulled out a notebook and started writing down every detail of what had happened. Times, dates, names, what the doctor said, what Mrs. Collins heard. I printed the x-rays the hospital had sent me digitally. I even wrote out word for word what Lisa had said to Emily while she hurt her. I wasn't just angry anymore. I was building a case. And when it was ready, I wasn't going to hide it in a drawer. I was going to put it where everyone could see it. Over the next few days, my kitchen table turned into a war room. Every time Emily was resting, I was gathering more pieces of the puzzle. I called Mrs. Collins and asked her to write down exactly what she saw and heard that afternoon. She didn't hesitate. She described the sound of Emily's cries, the way Mark blocked the doorway, the look of fear on Emily's face when she stepped inside. I contacted the hospital to make sure I had complete copies of her medical records. The language in the report was clinical, but damning displaced fractures of the proximal phalanges, ligament damage consistent with forceful hyperextension, acute contusions. I even saved the voicemail Lisa left on my phone 2 days later, where she said in a smug tone that maybe now Emily will learn respect. Each piece made my determination harder. I knew Lisa would spin the story if she had the chance. Mark was the kind of man who could lie without blinking and make people believe him. I couldn't give them that opening. I also called a friend of mine, Tara, who worked in family law. She walked me through the process of filing a police report and making sure Child Protective Services was notified. She reminded me to document every interaction from here on out. This wasn't just about getting justice. It was about creating a record so they could never hurt Emily or any other child again without someone knowing. On the 4th day, once I had everything organized, I sat at my computer and began to write. Not a private letter, but a public post. I typed out exactly what happened from the moment I dropped Emily off to the moment I picked her up at the hospital. I included Lisa's words, Mark's mocking voice, Mrs. Collins's intervention, the hospital's findings. I attached the X-ray images with Emily's permission, her small hand bones clearly showing the breaks. I blurred out identifying medical numbers but left the injuries visible. My hands shook as I typed, but not from fear. It was the adrenaline of knowing I was about to pull the curtain back. When I finished, I read it twice to make sure there was nothing they could twist into a falsehood. Then I hit post on Facebook where not just friends but neighbors, coworkers, and people from our community groups would see it. Within an hour, it had been shared over 100 times. Comments poured in, some in shock, some offering support, some saying they had noticed Lisa and Mark's behavior but hadn't wanted to say anything. By the next morning, the post had over 1,000 shares. My phone buzzed non-stop. Local parents were furious. Some mentioned they had stopped inviting Lisa to events because of how she treated their kids. Others said they believed every word because they'd seen Mark's temper themselves. Lisa called twice that morning, but I let it go to voicemail. Her messages were shrill and furious, accusing me of slander and threatening to sue. I saved both. That afternoon, a detective from the local police department called to arrange a time to take my statement. He had already spoken to Mrs. Collins and had the hospital records. The CPS worker called later, telling me they were opening an investigation. The ripple effect was immediate. Mark's construction company removed his photo from their website within 2 days. Lisa's law firm, where she worked part-time in administration, suspended her pending the investigation. Mom and Dad didn't call at first, but when they did, it was to tell me I had humiliated the family. I told them the only people humiliated should be the ones who hurt a child. That night, Emily sat across from me at the dinner table, her bandaged hand resting in her lap. She asked quietly, "Are you sure it's okay to tell everyone? What if they get mad?" I reached for her uninjured hand. "Let them get mad. If this keeps them from thinking they can hurt someone else, then it's worth it." She nodded slowly, and for the first time since that awful day, I saw a flicker of relief in her eyes. I knew this was just the beginning. Lisa and Mark would fight back, but now the truth was out, and once it's out, it's impossible to put back in the box. The backlash hit Lisa and Mark faster than I could have predicted. 2 days after my post went viral, a letter from Child Protective Services arrived at their home. A friend of mine who lived on their street told me she saw the caseworker's car parked in front for over an hour. The same day, the detective handling the case stopped by my house to update me. He said Lisa had been interviewed and had given a statement that contradicted both Mrs. Collins's account and the medical evidence. She claimed Emily had tripped and fallen into a table, bending her own fingers back. The detective didn't look like he believed her for a second. He told me the x-rays made it clear the injuries were not consistent with a fall. Meanwhile, Mark was scrambling to keep his business afloat. Several local contractors he worked with pulled out of deals. One even called me privately to say he had a teenage daughter and couldn't stomach working with someone accused of breaking a child's fingers. The power dynamic was shifting, and I could feel it. Lisa sent me a text that read, "You're destroying my life." I typed back, "You did that yourself the moment you put your hands on Emily." At first, my parents stayed silent, maybe hoping it would blow over, but after a week, Mom called. Her voice was tight. "Amanda, enough is enough. Do you really want your sister to lose everything?" I let her words hang for a second before answering. "Did you ask Lisa that when she was bending Emily's fingers until they broke silence on the other end?" I continued. "She could have stopped at any point. She didn't. And now you're worried about what she's losing. You should be worried about what she took from Emily." Mom muttered something about how I'd never understand old-fashioned discipline and hung up. It was clear they were still more concerned with family image than with justice. But others were not. People I hadn't spoken to in years reached out to say they supported me, that they admired me for refusing to stay quiet. A local parenting group invited me to speak at a meeting about recognizing abuse even within families. I accepted partly because I wanted to warn others, but also because I wanted Lisa to see that her attempt to control Emily had done the opposite. It had amplified our voices. The day of the meeting, I stood in front of 30 parents and told them exactly what happened. I saw tears, I saw anger, I saw heads nodding when I spoke about how easy it is to excuse bad behavior from relatives until it crosses an undeniable line. By the time I finished, several people had volunteered to write statements to support my case, saying they had witnessed Lisa belittle Emily in the past. That night, I posted photos from the meeting on Facebook tagging the parenting group. The caption read, "For anyone who thinks silence is the answer, remember that silence protects the abuser, not the victim." Mark didn't like that. The next morning, I woke up to a string of messages from him calling me pathetic and threatening to see me in court. I forwarded them straight to the detective. 2 days later, the detective called to tell me Mark had been advised to cease all contact with me and Emily. The investigation was moving forward, and with the evidence stacking up, I could see the panic setting in for both of them. Lisa's friends started unfriending her online. She stopped showing up at the coffee shop she used to frequent because people stared. I knew public shame wasn't the same as legal justice, but it was a start. And every day that passed, the story spread further. Local news picked it up after a reporter saw my post. They didn't use Emily's name, but they detailed the allegations and the medical findings. Seeing it in black and white on a news site sent a surge of vindication through me. Emily read it over my shoulder and whispered, "They believe me." I hugged her carefully, mindful of her healing hand, and told her, "Of course they do. You told the truth, and the truth has a way of breaking through no matter who tries to bury it." That night, as I watched her fall asleep with a little more peace on her face, I realized the worst damage Lisa and Mark could do had already been done. and it was my job to make sure they never got the chance to do it again. When the official notice came that Child Protective Services had found Lisa's actions to be substantiated abuse, it was like a weight pressing on my chest finally eased. The detective called me the same day to say the district attorney was reviewing the case for possible assault charges. I thanked him but kept my voice steady. I knew there was still a long road ahead. Emily's fingers were healing, though physical therapy was painful. She pushed through each session with the same determination she'd always had, but sometimes I caught her looking at her hand like it was a reminder of something she wished she could forget. I told her often that scars can mean survival just as much as they mean hurt. In the meantime, Lisa's life was unraveling. Her part-time job let her go citing reputational concerns. Mark's business lost more clients, and the couple stopped showing up at family gatherings. My parents tried to act as mediators again, calling to say things like, "Maybe you've made your point. Maybe it's time to let it go." But I couldn't not yet. Letting it go would mean allowing everyone to pretend it was just a bad moment, something that could be smoothed over with polite smiles. This wasn't that. This was a pattern that had boiled over into violence, and it needed to be remembered exactly as it happened. I spent evenings going through the comments on my post, saving everyone from people who had witnessed Lisa's cruelty or Mark's temper in the past. I knew these might become important if the case went to court. I also made sure Emily was surrounded by support friends who believed her neighbors, who checked in my friend Tara, who brought her small gifts after each therapy session. Slowly, I saw her start to open up again. One afternoon, she came to me holding a flyer for a self-defense class at the community center. "Can I do this?" she asked. I smiled proud. "Absolutely." She started going twice a week, and each time she came home, she looked taller somehow, not in inches, but in the way she carried herself. It felt like the beginning of something new for both of us. The rest of the family kept their distance. Some were openly cold, others awkward and uncertain, but there were a few quiet messages from relatives who said they were proud of me for standing up even if they couldn't say so publicly. I understood. Speaking out against family is hard, but the ones who stayed silent to protect their own comfort had shown me exactly where they stood. That clarity was worth more than forced holiday dinners or fake hugs. Lisa never apologized, not once, but she didn't try to contact Emily again either. That silence, at least, was something I could live with. I knew she was angry that she blamed me for the consequences she was facing, but I also knew she'd think twice before putting her hands on anyone's child again. And for now, that was enough to keep moving forward. As the weeks turned into months, Emily's strength returned piece by piece. She could move her fingers now without wincing, and the physical therapist said her grip would be back to normal soon. I watched her confidence grow alongside her recovery. She started laughing more, telling me about school, without hesitation, even making plans with friends again. Seeing her reclaim parts of herself made all the battles worth it. I had learned how to draw a hard line with family, something I once thought impossible. Now it felt like second nature. If anyone questioned why I cut ties with Lisa, I didn't hesitate to tell them the truth. The same clarity seeped into other areas of my life, too. I no longer felt obligated to attend gatherings where I knew Emily wouldn't be comfortable. We built our own traditions, small but meaningful. On Sundays, we'd cook breakfast together or go for hikes in the foothills. It was simple, but it was ours. The people who mattered were the ones who showed up for us without conditions. Even some relationships I thought were beyond repair found new ground. My grandmother, who had stayed quiet at first, called one day to say she understood now why I had gone public. She told me she'd been thinking about how many times in her own life she'd been told to keep quiet for the sake of appearances and how wrong that was. Hearing that felt like a bridge being rebuilt, not the same as before, but stronger in a different way. Emily's self-defense class was becoming a highlight of her week, and I went with her sometimes watching from the side as she learned how to hold her ground. She'd glance at me after nailing a move, her smile saying more than words ever could. There was no undoing what happened, but there was power in knowing we were moving forward together, not shrinking from the shadow Lisa had tried to cast over us. I didn't know what the next chapter would bring, whether Lisa would face charges, whether she'd fade completely from our lives or try to reappear one day, but I knew we'd be ready. Whatever form it took, the bond between me and Emily had been tested and reinforced. She knew I would protect her, and I knew she trusted me. That was something Lisa could never take away. In a strange way, the worst day of our lives had carved out a new sense of who we were as a family, just the two of us. Stronger, sharper, unshakable. 6 months after that day, I was sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee when my phone buzzed. The screen lit up with a flood of notifications, over 60 unread messages, all from the same number. It was Mom. I hesitated before opening them, bracing myself for whatever storm was about to hit. The first one read, "Amanda, where are you?" Then another, "It's urgent. Please answer." The tone shifted as the messages went on from pleading to panicked. "Lisa's in trouble. We need your help." By the 20th message, the desperation was obvious. "Mark's been arrested. She's a wreck. Just talk to her." I kept scrolling, watching the words pile up. The last one simply said, "We're sorry for how things went. We just want the family back together." I set the phone down and stared out the window. The sky was clear, the air still. Emily was in the living room laughing at something on TV. For a moment, I thought about all the times I'd wished for an apology, for them to acknowledge what they had done. But the truth was, this wasn't about regret, it was about desperation. They wanted me back in the fold now that their world was falling apart. But where were they when Emily needed them? Where were they when Lisa's hands crushed my daughter's bones and I was begging them to believe her? I thought about the sleepless nights, the tears Emily cried when she couldn't hold a pencil the way my own parents had told me to move on. And I realized something: I didn't need their apology anymore. I didn't need their approval, their presence, or their version of family. I had built something better without them. My life, my daughter's life, was no longer tangled in their web. I picked up my phone, typed a single message, and sent it. "I hope Lisa finds the help she needs. That's all I have to say." Then, I blocked the number. I felt a strange calm as I set the phone aside. Emily came into the kitchen, then her hair slightly messy from the couch, and asked if I wanted to go for ice cream. I smiled and grabbed my keys. As we stepped outside into the bright afternoon, I knew I'd made the right choice. The door I had closed wasn't locked by bitterness, it was sealed by clarity. Some people don't deserve to come back in once they've shown you what they're capable of. And as for me and Emily, we had our own family now. One built on trust, love, and the certainty that no one would ever break us like that again.